Well, you know, I shudder to think just what people who are watching and listening to us are actually thinking. That we came into government simply to take everybody else for a ride. That is only people within the MPP who have a basic appreciation of what should or should not be. Or maybe that we are all sitting here to take some moral lessons from persons within government and the MPP, because other than that, or short of that, I probably would shudder to think that anybody would be telling us that if you were taking over 50 million cedis. And Annie, recently you heard the debate about the cost of feeding kids for a day. And you heard the caterers demanding even a small increment. Think about what that kind of money does and what it can buy. In any case, at the time when this cathedral project was awarded to David Ajayi and co., one, it was totally sole sourced. Two, he was not even registered as an architect. And if you recall, there was a huge debate at the time when the design for this cathedral went public. And even the Architectural and Engineers Association had cause to protest. I'm sure you remember that debate, so that is one. Secondly, we talk about tourists. On the list of 10 things to do when you arrive in Ghana, one of them is not to visit cathedrals or churches. But presently, as we speak, we have 40 of these cathedrals dotted around the country. We have 24 owned by the Catholics. We have 11 by the Anglicans, 124 by various other churches. And I'm sure you know about the Lighthouse one in Ekropon, a fantastic edifice built by a church.
So the top 10
things to do.
What's it called?
Yes. And then
tourist centers.
And then the next thing is, do you honestly think that Christians who go on a leap of faith and travel, for example, to various places such as to the Basilica in Rome or to Israel, for example, to Jerusalem, will now see Ghana as that spiritual destination to come to? Is that why we are building this cathedral on all the lies, on the misinformation and disinformation? That we think that just because in one hand we are giving somebody 9 cedis to feed a child per day, that we can use the other hand to take away 25 million and give to a sole source architect who could actually design.
The party chair has said that, or Kafudigi, the fact that we're owing doesn't mean that Annie, if we think as a nation we need something.
I have no doubt in my mind that any architect of repute, worth whatever it is he's worth or she's worth, will happily design this project for free. The social capital to that individual alone beats anything that you and I can begin to imagine. There are some cases that professionals take absolutely pro bono because of the social capital and mileage that it brings you, and you gain absolutely nothing or ask for nothing in return because it actually serves even as an advert. You understand me? So I don't even want us to belabor that. In any case, in 2019, in 2020, and in 2021, very little mention was made of the cathedral. There has been no budgetary allocation or request for same. Everybody has cited the Appropriation Act for all the years that I've mentioned. We've looked at the appendices of all the budget statements. Apart from mere mention, there is no other evidence of how much or a request for same, etc. Nothing. And if you notice very carefully, these payments are coming from where? From the presidency. They have not been subjected to any parliamentary scrutiny. It has not been submitted to the Finance Committee of Parliament. We have financial regulation management rules in place. And these all form part of the basis for which all those actions were taken. In any case, before government undertakes such expenditure, I believe that it's only fair that same is subjected to Parliament, so that at least we can know how much is involved, who is paying for what, and what goes to who. But Annie, when they spoke largely about seed capital, I mean, what we've experienced really is an avalanche of state funds being committed to somebody's personal pledge in a redemption of sin. And sadly, you can see that the communication is changing. It is now a tourist attraction. It is a center for many other things. Remember that the venerable Reverend Opuni Frimpong told us categorically that state funds were not going to be used to construct the cathedral. The venerable reverend is still very much available. Whilst nobody says that we should not give a gift to God, but God will say to you also that you should first feed my children who are poor and hungry and need clothes first. When the National Mosque was being constructed,
God said,
remember
help the needy. He didn't say eradicate poverty. He said help the needy.
So if you cannot feed children at school, even basics.
When you are done, I will read the statement.
If we have not published any textbooks, even as the curriculum has changed, if we have failed even to meet the requirements in terms of flooding, and if we have failed to meet, and I think my sister mentioned something about arrears in statutory funds. At no time in the history of this country, and prove me wrong, has there been any government, NDC or otherwise, that has collateralized, Get Fund, ESLA, all the other ones? Never in the history of this country. Presently, they are even looking forward even to the meager resources that are currently being received from the e-levy. And it was the same John Kuma who mentioned that if there was a need to further collateralize and it was e-levy that was available, then so will government do. We are actually suffocating under the burdens of unsustainable debt. So when one architectural firm continues to receive these huge sums of money, and it calls for a probe, it calls for an investigation. Look, Rome wasn't built in a day. And all the religious enclaves we have, where people travel the length and breadth to go and visit these sites, did not happen overnight. When there are economic slumps, tourism across the world suffers too. So for any new entrant to the tourist market, remember that the others will also be clamoring for the same number of visitors, etc. Have you heard recently that the cost of visiting Ghana to a tourist was the highest on the scale of 1 to 10, at 15,000 on average? You see, when we say that government currently has become almost immune to its own promises, that they were just highfalutin noises that government was making, that in the same breath, government has literally collateralized every levy that was introduced to serve a particular purpose. And Annie, all that I can say that I have experienced in terms of the current administration's proclivity for spending and ostentation is the fact that I am yet to see any measures in terms of austerity, prudence, cutting back on profligate spending. The office of government machinery, the president's office, the seat of government, has actually increased in numbers of its staffing to 995. And this is what we have on the official list submitted to Parliament. We have also seen the monies that are currently being expended on the cathedral, most of which were actually being done in secret and not made public. We are also witnessing the levels of corruption into which we have sunk. And if anything is to go by, then go back and track the outbreaks of government's own spending. And you know, Annie, there's a point I've made here many times about the persons who benefit directly from all of these transactions, especially borrowing from Eurobond and others. It is the same companies that are owned by our current finance minister, and of course, now the Minister of State in charge of finance. And you can go out there and check on these things. You remember the Wache parties that were held. So yes, I'm not surprised that the Honorable Freddie Blay would tell us what he's saying. I'm not surprised at all. When a few people are literally sharing all that the spoils of war can give, naturally, people will say the things that they're saying. You know, it is only when your mouth is full that you struggle to speak. But the one who sleeps on an empty stomach appreciates what it feels like to have one good meal a day. It's normal. And these are matters that we do not have to pretend. Leave Accra. Go to other parts of the country. Go and see what this hardship means to individuals in that community. And Haja, you know, The numbers, and if I open my phone for you right now, you run away. The requests, basics, and sometimes, look, I went for a program recently, I had a paper to deliver, and someone came right up to me just as I finished and gave me a note. When I opened the note, I teared up. And you see, sometimes people will say, oh, but why do you bother? Some of these ones are born out of desperation. I have thousands of them on my phone. She's no exception.
Were you not getting requests
she knows.
when you were in office? When
in fact, they have quadrupled. And it's the reason why my other number, most often than not, even I am hiding from it. At a time of extreme hardship, it is not even easy even for people who want to help to be able to find the resources. You know, as individuals, we all work also very closely with many people within rural settings and communities. I have a foundation that works on a lot of these things. Even when I met Hajia here today, there was a conversation I was going to have with her leaving here about the numbers of our sisters and mothers. What our daughters have now been reduced to and what they use their bodies for. Largely as a direct result of extreme hardship. There are conversations that sometimes we don't even have in public because you will even be ashamed that you can even afford 2 square meals a day. Look, beyond a pledge made by the president, and I have no doubt, Annie, look, I am sure that the president can even call. I remember there was a debate at some point about the cost of his travels alone on private jets. Imagine that those monies were even committed and the president could have told us, look, I'm going to cut back on trips. I'm cutting back on the cost of travel. I am flying commercial because the government jet is not in good shape. And I'm committing the resources that were needed to have been voted, for example, for my cost of my travel and expensive lodgings to the construction of this cathedral as my seed investment. In any case, the taxpayers have committed by way of valuable land, which I believe in the regions of $320 million. And this is a matter of public record. So Ghanaians, as taxpayers, have contributed our equity already. And same state resources are being used again to reconstruct. Like I said, I believe that naturally we have many communities where we could go and locate a construction or a build of this kind, and we will derive enormous social capital from it. But Annie, at the expense of school feeding, at the expense of Get Fund, and I tell myself every day that I hope that one day we will recommit to ensuring that school children do not lie on the floor to write for lack of access to what? Basic desks and seats in these schools. Fortunately, we all hail from rural communities. And I know as prospective members of parliament, one of the things on which we campaign largely is that we will remove what? Schools under trees. Or schools that have no tables and chairs. You know, look, I believe that there is a certain level that government must not reduce itself to. I think we are at that point where it appears that government just came into office to please itself, not the people who put us in office. To do what of necessity makes us happy or pleasing in our own eyes. I've wondered sometimes why His Excellency the President has stopped the media engagements, where media people are able to ask him direct questions. Some of these things can largely be explained. If you go to Parliament and you announce the benefits that will accrue to us because of the construction of a national cathedral, but you do not tell us how you intend to fund it, and in another breath you tell us that this is a personal pledge that you have made and that it will be funded through private sources. You set up a trustee group of trustees to go out there and seek for resources to fund the construction. And then suddenly we hear that huge sums of money are being expended under the desk and under the table and being paid out to a contractor that we do not even know how he was sourced, whether through sole sourcing, whether competitive tendering, whether through any competitive whatever. We don't know what the procurement rules were. You know, look, Annie, sometimes I wish that you people would go back and play some of the conversations that led up to this administration being ushered into office. These days, you hear any government official talking about fighting corruption, about reducing corruption, about doing something about ostentation. Well, it's actually the very odd time that you hear that. But we've heard the Office of Special Prosecutor.
Yeah, but
we've heard about their challenges.
The chair has said it recently when the legislation came up. He said that, well, it's all moves of fighting corruption.
I have said it on this platform of yours, that revelation that was made by that leaked document, pages of the late Sir John's will, was an intervention by God himself to expose the avarice and the greed that has engulfed this government. And every Ghanaian everywhere must appreciate that fact. Do you become president to serve your own wills and caprices? Do you become a leader of a country to do what pleases you? To totally do away with all state interventions of curbing excesses of leaders? Because Parliament is actually that voice.